okay, the script says that we need to have a carousel, you know. Now, we knew that the carousel was coming, but what we didn't realise was that there was going to have to be sort of like 50 tents around that are part of this picnic event or something, which, you know, the carousel is a focus on. So that tent company will sort of say, well, yeah, we can deliver you, you know, 50 tents tomorrow morning, but can we have $5,000 in the bank by sort of 2 p.m.? So I've got to get all of that signed off, got to keep that relationship going so that the art department know that even though they're on set, I'm in charge of stuff and I'm getting stuff done for them.
Welcome to Filmmaking Framed, your video podcast uncovering the realities of filmmaking. I'm your host, Daniel Hughes.
And I'm your host, Tom Dexter.
With us today is Akbar Kurtha, first assistant accountant who's worked on projects such as The Gold, Fast and Furious 9 and Heartstoppers 3. Great to have you with us, Akbar.
Oh, thanks, guys. Nice to meet you. But nice to see you.
So, please, can you define for us the role of first assistant accountant?
Okay, so the first assistant accountant is a role where I'm sort of supervising the team and supporting the production accountant. So essentially on those projects that you've just suggested, apart from Fast and Furious 9, where I was actually a cashier, is where I started off very early on. But what I do is I'll check that the petty cash and the cashier is doing their job accurately. And then we also have the accounts payable side of things, where we are paying for invoices that are coming in, such as lighting trucks, utilities, and locations. And then we're also managing and supervising payroll to make sure that the payroll is achieved every week and people are paid by the deadline. And so we work quite closely with the producers who are signing off all of our work, because there's obviously got to be checks and measures to make sure that, you know, we aren't sort of abusing our roles and money is spent appropriately. And that eventually gets reported back to the studio who is funding the project. So that could be Netflix, Warner Brothers, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Could you take us through very briefly what each of those roles are, maybe starting from the junior position, working all the way up to that production accountant?
Yeah. So let's say with costume, they'll have production cards, which are essentially credit cards. And what they'll do is they will go out and they will spend the money that we've given them, which could be, say, £500 or above. And they have to return that money through receipts so that we can reimburse it. So the cashier's role is to check through all the receipts, make sure that we've got all of the paperwork that backs up the request that they're putting in. And what's really important in that role is to accurately record the VAT, because part of the way our budgets are kind of worked out is there is a side of it where people are kind of going, well, we're going to get this much VAT back. So that is kind of extra money for costume department to spend. So we need to accurately record the VAT that we're going to claim back so that they've got a bit more money to play with. And so the cashier's role is to basically manage and check all of the kind of petty cash or P-card transactions that we made. That would then be checked by me. It will be posted on the system. And then what we'll do is we will reimburse whatever they have sent through to us. And different companies kind of work in different ways. But what we tend to do is we try to encourage people to do stuff on a weekly basis so it's manageable and it's not out of control. Because the last thing you want as the cashier is, as you go into wrap, to find out that, say, there's £30,000 worth of, you know, P-cards that need to be reconciled and people aren't around and they've suddenly gone to different jobs. So we need to kind of sort of have a few kind of checks in place just to make things efficient, really. And then we go into the accounts payable side of things. So accounts payable is more of the invoicing side of stuff. So that can be from somebody who's working as a limited company, or it can be a location manager who's sort of saying, right, well, I've got the so-and-so hotel, but they need to be paid this afternoon in order for us to have keys to go in tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. So those are our urgent payments. And then you'll have other things which will be kind of 1 to 2 payment runs a week. I tend to try and do 2 payment runs a week because I just want to stay on top of our responsibilities. And a lot of those things are things like kind of, you know, cars that we're or car companies that we're using to kind of transport kind of, cars back and forth. We'll have utilities such as honey wagons, lighting, camera, Panavision, for example, is a big supplier. So, on a weekly basis, they need to be paid because we don't want to upset any of these people either. We want to keep them on our side. So that's the accounts payable side of things. And then the payroll side of things is basically, I don't necessarily do this. The payroll accountant will check the time cards to make sure that people are in when they're supposed to be in, and they're being paid for the work that they've done. And then what we do is we will check through all of that data to make sure that it's accurately being recorded. Because if you imagine a spreadsheet that's got about 400 people on it, it's very easy to miss whatever it might be, a little bit of mileage or, kind of a payment for a computer or something or other. So all of those things kind of just need to be double checked. And then that will be signed off by the producers. And then every 2 weeks, we record what's happened, and we then go to the studios and essentially cost report. And we say, you've given us X, we have spent this is what the budget looks like currently, these are our liabilities, and this is what the state of play is at the moment.
Makes sense. And it makes sense that they want to have those fairly regularly in case a production's costs are spiralling.
Absolutely. And then there's another side to this, which is sort of later on. What happens is that once we get into wrap, we hand over the show to the post-production accountant. And the post-production accountant is kind of in charge of that latter stage. So there's still cost reporting. It might be every 4 weeks because things aren't quite as fast-paced. But in that realm, you've kind of got things like music, VFX, dubbing, actors come back in and they sort of do their ADR. And ultimately, what we're trying to achieve as a department is to effectively and efficiently record all the data so that we can get a tax credit back. So that's also part of the numbers game where people kind of go, well, look, or the studio goes, if we invest X, we will get so-and-so back as part of the tax credit, but it's all got to be recorded accurately. And our work is essentially on file for about 3 years. So somebody could pull out and sort of say, well, I just want to double check that payment that was made for £25,000 to the so-and-so hotel, what that looked like, and has it been signed off properly and, accurately recorded. So there's a kind of a sort of a bigger game here that is about sort of reporting, but also getting money back from certain sort of, sources and making sure that everything is done efficiently and effectively.
Yeah, makes sense. And it's incredibly important. It's both from getting the tax credit and from claiming back the VAT, because obviously that's 20%. So if you spend 10 million, the VAT of that, assuming it's all VATable, is 2 million. So it's a huge amount of money if those are not done correctly.
Absolutely. And so that's kind of the side of the accounting department. And, ultimately we're kind of under a lot of pressure because there's all of this kind of reporting stuff and trying to keep the crew and all the departments happy. And I feel that that's really important. I mean, I'll talk about this in a second, but, I've worked on both sides of the camera. So I know costume designers in a different context, and I know how much pressure that they're under, and I know that they're just doing their best to kind of make this thing look as amazing as possible. So it's really our job to maintain that rapport, keep things going in the right direction. And occasionally, of course, little things are going to cock up, for want of a better phrase, but it doesn't have to be the end of the world. It's just a case of, we spotted that. Let's just kind of say, can we just deal with that in the next couple of days and get it resolved, et cetera, et cetera,
You're trying not to make their jobs any harder.
Absolutely.
And similarly, I suppose they should try not to make your job any harder by doing their accurate reporting and receipts.
And I think, that's really, really important, that we're all a team. I think the pandemic kind of created a few problems in as much as what it did is it made us all kind of go into our different corners. And this is probably kind of across the globe. It's not just the film business. And so it meant that we were all kind of working disparately. So I think over the last couple of years, people are starting to kind of work together again and, really just sort of look one another in the eye with a smile and kind of go, we are here together, aren't we? There isn't, and I know different people work in different ways, but I'm very sort of personable. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. And when you're in a production office together, you can have lunch across departments. Whereas if everyone is working remotely, those kind of abilities to build relationships are reduced.
Absolutely. And you've got to be able to have a laugh. I mean, there's no point in being in this industry of all industries. Do you know what I mean? If you can't sort of have a smile on your face. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, especially with how much time we spend away from loved ones.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because we are essentially a family for that very short period of time. So, we've got to make it work.
On a sort of standard, let's say high-end TV show or film, let's say a studio film, what is the size of your department? How many are there who are cashiers and payroll? And
so it varies. So when I was on Fast and Furious 9 as a cashier, I was part of the second unit. So we were just a small team of 4. But at Leavesden, there seemed to be a team that I didn't actually interact with of about 15 people, so there was a much bigger team. I did a tiny bit of work on The Crown as well, and that was a team of about 6. I think there was 1 cashier. I was essentially sort of, an apprentice, and I think there was 1 production accountant and a couple of other, kind of AP and payroll people. So I think it depends on the size of the budget. I think the studio ones are much bigger, and they're dealing with kind of sort of tens of millions. Generally, the kind of stuff I'm working on, I'd say that it's probably a team of about 4 or 5, and then my role is to kind of support and supervise. And I sort of make it sort of my business to sort of really make people feel that they are supported and they're not on their own. Because sometimes just a load of stuff comes in unexpectedly, and you can't have somebody just kind of sort of sat there thinking, I can't do this is too much. You just kind of go, actually, let me just divvy this up, maybe do a bit myself, whatever. It doesn't really matter. I've got no ego around this. The title is the title. It's random. Do you know what I mean? The job is the job.
And what are the biggest misconceptions people have of the accounts department?
I think it's probably that we're boring. I think it's also this idea that we are on some kind of fee-based scheme, that if we can somehow doctor the numbers, we can retain maybe 10% of the budget or something. And I wish that were the case, but it's absolutely not. So I think there's that. And then I think there's also an element that, we are very close to the producers and therefore we're not to be trusted. But actually that's not the case at all. I think most accountants, I mean, obviously you're going to get the odd kind of character, but most people realize that, we are there to support the crew. We've got to make this happen. And we are on a timeline, so you've got a 10-week shoot for the sake of argument, and you've just got to get the job done. And so occasionally I think where there's misconceptions about what are they up to, because we're working away quite quietly, is we've got a lot of checks and balances, as I said. So if you were to come to me with an invoice and you said, okay, here's a 10 grand invoice that needs to be paid this afternoon, it not only has to be signed off by yourself as the head of department, it then goes to the line producer, it then goes to the producer, and it also gets checked by the production accountant or the financial controller. So that takes time. It's also then got to be put into the system. And then when it's on the bank, assuming that everything has gone well, I might load that payment onto the bank, but there's probably 2 people who are going to release and approve that payment. So it takes time. So people sort of think, God, what are they up to? Alongside doing the cashier work, doing the AP stuff. I think on my last job, we were probably making payments of a couple of million a week. So
Wow.
Can you imagine how many invoices that is? Do you know what I mean? So and those invoices have to be checked. And even with the AP side of stuff, you've got to make sure that the VAT is correct, because different things have different VAT percentages. So you'll have, say, hotels, which might be 5%. So if you have accidentally put that in as 20%, now you might just kind of go, that's just one invoice. But if you've done that quite a few times, at the end of the month, when you've got to report the VAT and you start looking at the numbers on the software, go, this doesn't make sense. Apparently, we've got, we've paid 20,000 in VAT for the sake of argument. But the numbers aren't kind of corresponding. So you have to go back and you have to check through these things. So that's what the first accountant ideally is doing, is catching those things. So I have a little kind of sort of VAT calculator. Every time we do accounts payable, I'll just kind of check the VAT and make sure what's in the software correlates with what I think it is, and try and pick up those mistakes. Because it's much easier to find £50 than it is, say, 50 grand. You don't want that to happen. But all of this stuff takes time. So I think people are just like, what are they doing in there? And why are they so quiet and grumpy? And what are they up to? They're trying to destroy this film and my creativity. But because I am a creative, I just laugh about it and I explain to people what I do so that they know that I'm on their side ultimately.
And if a mistake is made, it's going to cost you a lot of time dealing with that and trying to find that problem when you are also then doing all the other things that are still happening. The film doesn't stop while you try and work out where a payment went wrong.
Yeah, that's it. And you've got to constantly kind of just be checking stuff. So even with suppliers, you've got a statement of account which you'll ask for, because you'll sort of say, okay, well, we've been working with you for 2 months now. Can we just make sure that everything that should have been paid has been paid? And because I, as I say, purposefully kind of keep a relationship and a rapport with all of these vendors, they know that they can come to me and sort of say, invoice 111 hasn't been paid. And I'll go, that's strange. I'm sure I've paid everything. Let me go back and look through it. And I'll do a reconciliation. I go, gosh, you're absolutely right. So somehow that one has fallen through the system. Because you see, what happens is that at the beginning of our day, essentially, is looking at emails, because we're all kind of corresponding with each other on email. And there's got to be also an audit trail as well. So if somebody turns around and says, this is what we agreed, but actually that's not the case, you can go back and check the audit trail. You've got close to 150 emails that you've got to kind of get through and check in the morning, and prioritize certain things, and they go to different vendors. So occasionally something does get missed, But again, by having that rapport and relationship, and this is why I think it's really important that, people are communicative. Because if you're an outsider, so, okay, I use Panavision as an example. They are very much involved in the film industry. They know how it works, how stressful it is. But if you're a new company, and let's just say that you're a smaller supplier and you haven't heard from us for a while, you might assume we've done a runner, So it's really important that we kind of sort of reassure those vendors and say, hey, look, it's in the system. We just have a protocol of approvals. I'm currently looking at this. I can ping you an email once it's on the bank or whatever. And it just allays people's fears, just makes them feel, that they're sort of working with people that take them seriously and are being professional in their conduct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially because it's, particularly if there is going to be a delay for payment, you messaging that person, the response you get is just light and day, versus if they are like, where's my money? And you're like, oh, it's not yet coming, wait.
Yeah.
I mean, you do it as politely as you can, but if you've front-loaded that communication, people know that they can, or feel like they can trust you.
Yeah. Well, also because I have been a freelancer. I mean, I am a freelancer, but, more so on the other side of the camera, those payments are important. Do you mean? So if you are just waiting for £1,200 and someone isn't communicating with you and you've got bills to pay, it can feel very, very overwhelming. Yep. Whereas if somebody sort of says, hey, look, it's in the system, it's going to be on by Friday or Monday or something, it just allays people's fears. And just to remember that, the creative industry is full of more freelancers than we realise, which is really important.
Yeah. And it's true for crews as well. Presumably crews aren't paid, then they can get...
Antsy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, people have got bills to pay, haven't they? And we all do it. You're expecting a certain amount at the end of the month, and you expect that to be recorded appropriately. I mean, I think at one point we went through a phase where we needed more payroll accountants, and that was an industry-wide problem. So we had a few people kind of coming in that were being sort of a bit, what's best description? Sort of a bit sort of gun-ho, sort of a bit slapdash about their work. And that didn't help the reputation of the accounts department, because, again, it seems like we don't care. But what I think it's kind of an area where, ideally studios should sort of maybe look at this a bit more, is that, we do need to kind of bring more people in. We need to train them up properly, so that, things like this don't happen. Once in a blue moon, yes, it's going to happen, but you don't want to be known as a department for just messing up the payroll on a weekly basis, because that is just not cool.
And accounts is very much one of those departments, with a perspective of an outsider, where it's, if everything is working, people are not thinking to thank you. If things are not working, people are grabbing their pitchforks very quickly.
Absolutely. Well, if you think about it kind of sort of globally, certainly in the West, we are kind of a capitalist, economics-driven culture, right? So money's very emotive. Now, of course, like, any sort of reasonable person who's not stressed kind of thinks, oh, it's 500 quid. I'm sure it'll come in next week. I'll just ping an email or whatever. But it feels very personal. And when people don't answer, or they're a bit slapdash, or they've only paid 300 and they haven't explained what's, gone wrong, or don't communicate with you, it feels like a personal attack. So of course what they do is they come straight to the accounts department with their kind of, and I noticed that was very sort of obvious sort of post-pandemic, because I think people had been really sort of stretched financially, so again, keeping that sort of rapport in that relationship was sort of top of the list for me, so that people know that we are here to support them and we're not here to kind of mess things up or deliberately trying to line our pockets or whatever else,
Can I run a scenario by you? And maybe you don't know because you've only worked on studio films and they're all well funded. But in the independent space, there's cash flow is king, and they're getting independently financed through various means. And sometimes these films don't close their finance until after the film's shot, and so they've had to find cash flow from other ways. And sometimes they're in post production and the money's a bit short, and they're still waiting for more cash, or they're waiting for the VAT to come back so they can finish paying payroll and that sort of thing. Have you come across those scenarios, or what would you do in that scenario where actually you're doing all your job right, but the cash flow from the actual producers and the studio or the studio isn't coming through? How would you handle a scenario like that?
It's a really good question. I mean, to be honest with you, I've been fortunate enough to not to work in those kind of scenarios, but it must happen, because you're absolutely right. You get a low budget feature that might just be £1 million, and they're relying on all sorts of people. I mean, again, I would hope that there are certain contractual things that are in place to say that this is, the amount of money that will come in by so and so date, because that's how we kind of work with the studios. They'll say, you give us X cost reports, blah, 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 and we will make sure that we fund you every 2 weeks, every month, however it's meant to be. Because I think what's kind of disconcerting and unnerving for a crew that would find themselves in a situation that you're describing is that, will they ever be paid? And I think I would be slightly alarmed being in that situation too, because apart from anything else, okay, of course it's not on my shoulders. If 500 grand doesn't come in, there's nothing I can do. I can only work with the numbers that I've got in front of me. But, I guess being conscientious and thinking about the limited company that may have been set up in order for this production to happen, there is liability there, and you don't want to be sort of too involved with projects that, may not pay people. And I guess that's something that ideally should be discussed in advance, which is, we are a low budget production. We will be doing things slowly. And I say this because I worked on a project last year. This is as an actor, which I was going to talk about in a minute. And I think my fee was something like £500. It was very obvious when I got there that this was a low budget project. It wasn't sort of the bells and the whistles. And I'd just taken it for a bit of fun. So I'd kind of, in my head, kind of gone, look, what's the worst that's going to happen here? I'm not going to be paid 500 quid. It's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world. Whereas I guess, if you are waiting on 20, 30,000 pounds for sort of, whatever it is, 10, 20 weeks work, however it pans out, that could be quite frightening for somebody, because that's mortgage payments, that's rents, that's, all kinds of other responsibilities.
Yeah, no, brilliantly answered. Like I say, it doesn't happen often. And if people listen to this and they start freaking out, it doesn't happen often. No. It's only occasionally on very small things. But I just imagine that the accounts are getting it in the neck about that.
Definitely, yeah. And I think, also what usually happens with slightly bigger projects is there might be bonds in place where people have sort of put some money aside. The American Actors Union, for example, SAG, often issues kind of do not work notices as soon as they realise that something's not quite right and people aren't being paid on time. They jump on it straight away. So I think the unions also sort of help with that as well, to kind of go, guys, BEC2 particularly, which is a very strong union.
Yeah, and if people, again, sorry to interrupt, if people are listening to this or watching this, we have a list of resources on our website, and BEC2 is one of those ones on there to have a look through. And if you're working full-time crew, definitely consider joining, because they protect you from a lot of things. They
absolutely do, and they they kind of keep an eye on sort of rates and make sure that people are kind of paid in accordance with inflation and things like that.
And if you are a member of BEC2 and a production is you've done work and you've not been paid, Back2 can take up your case and pay your legal bills for that. But they can't do that if you join after the problem has emerged. So you need to be a member before you have the issue in order to get that protection. So don't think of it as if I'm ever in trouble, I'll join. You need to have joined.
And am I right in thinking there's student memberships? So if you're a student at the moment and you're thinking of getting into the industry,
I believe so. And I very much would not.
We'll get someone on from Back2 at some point.
Yeah.
I very much would not advise waiting for this. I think become a member as soon as you can. But every February for Valentine's Day, they do a Hearts Back2 membership where you can get it for £7.50 a month compared to like £10 or £15 a month, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's the way to think about it is it's an insurance policy, isn't it? You know, you start your insurance before you get in your car. You know, and that's it. You can't do it retrospectively because the insurance company will go, well, it's not really my responsibility. But you know, it's important, and I think Back2's particularly strong and very vocal, trying to kind of sort of keep sort of again checks and balances in the industry. So you kind of where's the harm? Do you know what I mean? To have that sort of protection. And then, of course, it's, if there are kind of some anomalies, that's for them to discuss with the producers and kind of iron out, whatever. But ultimately, the agreements are the agreements and people have to abide by them.
So I was going to ask, who are the people that you would work with closely in other departments?
So I work mainly with locations.
Mm-hmm.
I actively develop a relationship with locations because they are the department that have the most urgent payments. Literally, they're out there in the field kind of going, yikes, I've got to kind of find stuff. And of course, you've got a director and a producer kind of going, oh, it's a shame it doesn't have 4 windows. I'd rather it had 3, or the hallway needs to be a bit bigger, or whatever, artistic choices they're making. And so literally at the last minute, there will be a please, can we get this paid? And then what we need to do is make sure that the contracts are in place. So if I can have a good relationship with a location manager or their sort of, number one coordinator, I can then sort of say, is the contract being signed? Is it all here? Yes, I'll get it to you by 11 o'clock. Great. I'll start talking to the people I need to start talking about so that we can get this payment done by 4 o'clock today and you've got whatever you need for tomorrow morning. Because unfortunately, we'd like to think of the film industry as being sort of like super efficient and kind of planned in advance, but things are changing all the time, and locations that were promised sometimes fall through. Somebody has a different kind of artistic vision or a director or someone, and so then, that has to be taken into account. So I think that's a department that is sort of very much a roller coaster from my sort of perspective on things. And then I think costume need a lot of support because they do have P cards with big amounts on them, but they're spending those big amounts. So those cards need to be reimbursed and replenished because, they're a team of whatever, and you've got some people on set dressing and fixing and altering costumes. Well, you've got people out there buying, or you've got supervisors still trying to kind of design and make sure that it all kind of comes together. So what might seem to us like, well, they've got 10 grand on a card. Well, if you've got sort of a few A-list celebrities, you chew through that money very quickly, and then you may have sort of some supporting artists that also need to be dressed because it's a period piece or whatever. So we need to work quite closely with them. And then the art department, again, because they're sort of on their own kind of roller coaster, have a lot of last minute things. So they'll kind of go, okay, the script says that we need to have a carousel, Now, we knew that the carousel was coming, but what we didn't realise was that there was going to have to be sort of like 50 tents around that are part of this picnic event or something, which, the carousel is a focus on. So that tent company will sort of say, well, yeah, we can deliver you, 50 tents tomorrow morning, but can we have 5 grand in the bank by sort of 2 p.m.? So I've got to get all of that signed off, got to keep that relationship going so that the art department know that even though they're on set, I'm in charge of stuff and I'm getting stuff done for them, So
and the people who are signing it off, the line producer, the producers, they're pretty fast. Because I imagine they're doing a million other things as well.
Yeah, so what we have is we have a process. Now, again, I've been fortunate to work with sort of, very efficient producers. So we have a sort of a PO system. So the PO system is a purchase order. And what that is that you'll have the head of department create a purchase order as soon as they realize that cost is going to come in. Because apart from anything else, it helps them keep a track of their budget. Because obviously they've been allocated whatever it is, let's say 100 grand for the sake of argument. So they know that this cost for 5 grand is coming in. They sign that off. All of the other senior management sign that off as well. So the purchase order has been approved. We know everybody's okay with that cost. We then match that up with the invoice. It then gets sent around again and goes, you've approved the purchase order. Here's the invoice. It's exactly as we expected. There's no other costs. It's not going to take us over budget. And they go, great, sign off, sign off, sign off. I sometimes have to chase people because they're busy, but I don't mind doing that. Put it into the software, get it onto the bank, get it approved, get it released. And it's just a bit of a process, but a process that ensures for the greater powers that the money is being spent appropriately.
And do you prefer, or do you have a view on if the producers prefer, if you are creating a PO and you're not quite sure if it's accurate yet, because say I'm POing my security spend for this week and I haven't yet spoken to all my location managers to get all the costs. And so I'm confident that there will be an amended PO, and an amended PO goes through another round of approvals. It's for a different figure. In your experience, is it better to give a preliminary figure that be signed off and then it gets amended and then has to go through approvals twice? Or is it better to wait until there is an invoice to match the PO?
So I think for budgeting purposes, it's better if the PO's in first, even if it needs to be amended, because then everybody has eyeballs on the figures. Waiting for the invoice and then POing afterwards is something that, in a sense, it works. It's not impossible. But where it becomes a bit tricky is that if you're trying to keep an eye on your budget as the HOD, you can't necessarily stay on top of your costs. Having said that, locations is a really good example. So security, you sort of know there's a ballpark and they'll kind of allocate a certain amount and they'll say it's going to be £50,000 for X amount of time. We've taken into account there's going to be a bit of overtime and whatever, and there's a little bit of flexibility in those POs as well. But say something with locations, there'll be figures being discussed, but you do the deal on, say, Tuesday night. The invoice lands on Wednesday morning. It is 10 grand. The PO is then created that matches the invoice, and it kind of gets done in that way. So it's the ideal way is to do the purchase order first. But I think the reason why you've got to be a little bit flexible is that one of the hardest things about sort of film and TV making is trying to keep the train on the tracks. It's moving very, very fast. So if you're too pedantic about stuff and inflexible, what it does is it actually halts the process. Because I know, as I say, from both sides of the camera, okay, it's not ideal that we've only got 24 hours to pay for the location because we need to be in on Wednesday morning and, everything's got to be organised around it. Ultimately, that's how it happens. And we can't afford to lose that location, because then the knock-on effect of that, because, we were sort of dancing around and having too much fun, by being pedantic, is that essentially we would have to shut down the production for a day. And how much is that going to cost? Do you mean? And then if you wanted to do an insurance claim against that, well, then that's a whole other kind of can of worms that you've sort of opened up. So I just say, hopefully you're working with people who are well seasoned. Everybody gets it and understands that, look, let's keep the train moving. Let's keep this project on track. And if there are a few anomalies, let's just make sure the checks and balances are in place so the studio's happy and just keep everything going.
Can you talk about any particular example of something that was really difficult that came up, or a lesson that you learned from that difficulty?
Gosh, that's a really good question. So a difficulty, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Something might occur to me in a moment, but generally I think what I have learned is stay on top of your emails and keep asking for statements of account, just to make sure that we are abreast of all of those payments and nothing is falling through the cracks. Because ultimately, if I've got an AP assistant who's working with me and trying to kind of stay on top of stuff, they're probably processing God knows how many invoices on a daily basis. So if I just use my time productively and just make sure that, you know, everybody's happy and there's no issues. And I think the other thing, that example that comes to mind, is that I was on a project where things were being signed off too quickly, and I mean in terms of P cards. And at one point, there was a department that had unreconciled petty cash P cards that kind of came to about £70,000 or something. Do you know what I mean? So I was really worried about that. That the fact that they kept getting topped up despite the fact that receipts hadn't come in. And then we were getting closer and closer to the wrap period where people were going to disperse. And then suddenly you kind of have to ask the question, well, if they can't present you with a receipt that might be for £25 during production, well, when are they going to find it when they've moved on to their next job? So, you know, I really, for me, observing that made me think, actually, we should never allow that to happen. You know, it's better to be a little bit strict and say, guys, you've got 10 grand, give me two. Give me 2 grand's worth of receipts. We'll get those reconciled. We'll top up your card. We're on your side. But let's not let it get too far ahead of itself.
Have you seen crews who are putting in receipts way after wrap? Well, how far can you go before you're like, I'm sorry, we can't pay that. The company's shut down.
That's where post-production kind of comes in. So generally not. That there is a kind of cut-off point in as much as, so when you are given a petty cash float or a P card, it's usually under the terms that by the time you finish this job, you will have given us back everything that we need to account for this money that you've been given. And if you don't, we will then withhold some of your final pay or your holiday pay or whatever. And generally that keeps people sort of like moving, because they either want to take a nice holiday or they want to move on to their next job and not worry about it. But occasionally, again, things do fall through the cracks. Or somebody might realise, in fairness, they might kind of go, not so much with petty cash and P cards, but they might kind of go, oh God, I did buy that laptop cable for £120 6 weeks ago. I've just found the receipt. It was actually from my money and I'd like to be reimbursed. And then you present that to the post-production accountant, who's still liaising with the producer and the line producer and those people. And so things can be done retrospectively in that respect.
How long do the production accountants on the main shoot, how long do they stay post-wrap? How long?
Generally, I say about 3-4 weeks. So we have a wrap period of about, 4-ish weeks. Of course, it depends on each project, depending on the budget. And then it's handed over to the post-production accountant. And then there's a little bit of kind of overlap for a couple of days, maybe a week, where they can ask questions and whatever. And then they are in charge of it. And hopefully, if it's been handed over efficiently, most things will have been recorded, i.e., here's an invoice that we're still waiting for a PO to be approved, or, here's a petty cash claim that came in at the very last minute. I'm about to finish, but the receipts seem to be there. Can you check it or whatever? So we try to do it as smooth a handover as possible. I think one of my kind of sort of concerns about the accounts department is that it's always underfunded, and I think somewhere people sort of take it for granted and sort of think, 3 people can do it and 2 people can do it and whatever, and actually that's not the case. And that also then works into the wrap period, where we do need to be all hands on deck to make sure everything is done properly. And so that's something I would like to see change in the industry, where, execs kind of go, actually, we've got to be serious about accounts, because ultimately that does affect VAT, that does affect the tax credit, that does affect post-production. So that's somewhere where I think we just need to beat the drum a bit louder.
Do the shoot production accountants ever swap over to become the post-production accountant?
Yes, they do. So I did some post on the Gold. So I started off as the first assistant, and then I became the post-production accountant because I had some experience. And I'd also been on the job. And so I think what's quite important in that respect, and again, it depends on, budgets and what needs to be done, is that you still have a rapport with people. So they can get in touch with you. They know who you are. You're a familiar name. You're a familiar face. And then they can sort of say, hey, can you check something out for me or whatever, And so I think in a way, if that can happen, it's much nicer, rather than kind of, and now I'm dealing with Mr. or Ms. X, and I don't really know who they are, but they seem to be in charge of the £3 grand that I'm owed. Again, it's trying to get rid of these sort of elements that make people feel nervous because money is so emotional.
And the scenario in which that wouldn't happen, is it do you need a specialized knowledge of the post-production process to be the post-production accountant, or just if you're a really good accountant, you'll be fine either way?
Yeah, so if you've got sort of sufficient amount of experience in production, you can be an effective post-production accountant, because actually post-production is a bit calmer. If you think about it, ultimately we're not in the shoot. We haven't got sort of X amount of departments kind of making demands on us. What you've got is ultimately you've got a post-production supervisor who's coordinating the edit suites. Let's make sure that the editors get paid regularly, etc., etc. You don't really have as much reconciliation to do on P cards or whatever. It's just nominal things. And then it's kind of some cast payroll, so you've got ADR and then you've got VFX contracts and music and those sorts of things. So it's actually a much calmer process. So you don't necessarily need to be more skilled, but I think it does help to have production knowledge. And if you are on the same project and you have a rapport with the crew, I think that that's also good as well.
And it obviously varies kind of project to project, but I'm curious, both from a payroll standpoint and from a production spend standpoint, who are the kind of typically 4 most expensive departments for each of those?
Gosh, I think camera is a very expensive department. I think grips are very, very well paid. Just trying to think of who else sort of on the payroll that sort of jumps to mind. You've got HODs, and depending on their level of experience, they'll be sort of quite highly paid. And obviously then you've got producers as well. But yeah, I think for me immediately, just off the top of my head, I'm sort of thinking it's kind of camera and camera support, because those grips essentially are lighting and camera folks,
Are you making cast payments, or are they all done before production starts?
No, so they're done during, because again, there are sort of milestones that have got to be hit. So you don't necessarily, let's just say you've agreed, that an actor's going to get paid $5,000. They don't get paid that obviously before they've done the job, because nobody does. But then there might be certain milestones where they'll sort of say, okay, well, you'll get a portion of that after your first week, your second week, at the end of the job. Some just get paid once they've completed the job. So again, it varies, but ultimately there is a cast payroll, there is a crew payroll, and then there's usually a dailies payroll. So you've got people that are kind of coming in just for a day here and a day there. And there's something called a 7-day rule, where there are slightly different rules that apply to them because they're on a very short contract. So that's usually done on a separate payroll.
So can you go into some detail of what those differences are?
So in terms of the
7-day rule.
Oh, so the 7-day rule is something like, now again you're testing me here, but it's something like if they're only working for 7 days and they're not kind of contracted in the standard way, I think that affects either their national insurance or their tax status or something like that. So I think you can just pay them so locations marshal might be a good example of that, where you might just kind of go, so the fee agreed for the 2 days is £500 and they get paid for £500, and then they are responsible for telling HMRC, this is what I've earned on that particular job. Whereas obviously when you're doing the crew payroll, depending on whether they are self-employed or PAYE, you're recording that. And also it's budgeted slightly differently as well, in as much as, so I take on let me just think, let's just say the production accountant for the sake of argument. We know that over a 20-week period, they're going to get paid X. We know that they are invoicing and they're a limited company, so that's how their money's going to be sort of allocated. If people are PAYE, then you're paying their national insurance. You might be paying a pension contribution, so all of that has to be taken into account. So that doesn't necessarily apply to the dailies. And then with the cast, it's usually on invoice. So the agent will either invoice or the accounts department will just kind of go, it's contractual, so we don't need an invoice, we'll pay it. And the reason I say it in those terms is that it seems that every department works differently, different people have, so I won't even kind of get into the complexities of that. It can happen one of two ways. And then there'll be equity contributions if they're equity members, and that goes towards their pension scheme, etc., etc. So
are dailies dailies are usually PAYE or usually limited, or it depends on the department?
No, so I think so. I'm generally thinking of locations, and I think that they are usually self-employed. From my memory, they might also be PAYE because I haven't done a dailies payroll in a while, so I'm sort of blanking a little bit. But I think they can be one or the other.
And how did you get into the industry? When did you know that you wanted to work in film and TV? Let's explore you a little bit.
Okay, so mine's a kind of sort of a funny journey in as much as I trained as an actor, and so when I graduated, I did maybe kind of 1 or 2 years of sort of like standard being an actor, being unemployed and whatever, and the anxiety was just killing me. I wasn't kind of cut out for that sort of level of creative life. So I started to do little side hustle jobs, and one of them was a little bookkeeping job. And somebody had said, look, I can pay you £10 an hour if you just kind of do my receipts and put them into a spreadsheet and whatever. And I thought, great, a little bit of money just to keep me afloat. Anyway, kind of fast forward about 20 years. So now I've kind of had, quite a good acting career. I've kind of worked, et cetera, and I'm doing other kind of little side jobs, which included sort of, being a fitness instructor and teaching yoga and various things, And I had a friend at Soho Theatre who said, look, I need somebody to kind of come in for about 6 months to support the production accountant. And would you be up for doing it? And I said, yeah, great, as long as I can sort of do auditions and things, So I worked for him for 6 months. And then another friend sort of said, look, could you come on to Last Christmas? We're doing some additional photography and do the cashier role. So that's the P cards and the cash. And actually back then it was cash, so there was no P card. So it was literally kind of counting out the pennies when they brought it back in to make sure that the floats kind of reconciled. So I did cashier work there and then on Fast and Furious. And then a job came up at a post-production company. So I took that job and we were in the pandemic. And so what was really interesting was that this sort of side hustle became my main source of income. And if you remember back to the pandemic, so much kind of online content was being consumed so fast. Companies were coming to us kind of going, we need this project finished, we need this project done, et cetera, et cetera. So I got an awful lot of experience in a very short space of time. And then I went out into the production world and started to work on sort of essentially high-end TV at that point. And I think just sort of carved a little kind of nook for myself, which kind of works. And I think what's really interesting about it is that sort of along this way, it wasn't completely sort of, bookkeeping, fitness instructor, accounting. I'd also produced some plays. And so I was becoming more and more aware of budgets and, how things are kind of portioned out and how contingencies are in place in case if things go wrong, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that knowledge was coming into play. And in a bizarre sort of a way, I think in this day and age, if I were talking to young filmmakers or young artists, I would say go and volunteer for a week or two in an accounts department. Not necessarily because you want to be an accountant, we know you don't. But actually, it would just give you an insight into how important money and finance is as far as this industry is concerned. Because when you're a creative, it's all about you. Right? I'm going to be famous one day, guys. You just need to watch out, right? Watch this space, guys. But the reality is that, projects cost money. That funding has to be found. As we've said, there's tax credits, there's VAT, all of that has to be accounted for appropriately. People have to be paid on time. And, you can be sat there kind of going, well, they promised me a sandwich and I've been sat here for 5 minutes. How dare they make me wait? When actually, when you see the bigger picture, you see actually, it's a machine, it's an industry. And it's really important that we work together collaboratively, regardless of being in front or behind the camera, because it ends up showing on screen. Yeah. When people are working well together, the end product is usually good,
And though we would, particularly some of the more creative types, would love to think that it's not the case, but money is the lifeblood of a production in the sense that if it's not there, things will grind to a halt very quickly.
Absolutely. And as far as the studios are concerned, they're there to make a profit, let's face it, and if they're not making a profit, because obviously we know that not every film or every TV show is going to do brilliantly, there's got to be other things like Barbie, for the sake of argument, that has done exceptionally well that funds those other losses, So it's just kind of recognizing, that it's a really, really important part. And, studios wouldn't be there if they weren't making a profit, especially the big ones, the big TV companies, big film companies, whatever, So they're looking for whether it's like the best creatives or the best teams so that they can entrust a hell of a lot of money. Do you know what I mean? We're not talking about, oh, well, here's 500 quid, good luck, mate. Do you know what I mean? Once it's signed off, it runs into tens of hundreds of millions, if not occasionally billions, if things go Waterworld wrong. Allegedly.
Another good reason to volunteer with an accounts department is seeing all of the other departments that are involved in a film. If you're fairly new, there might be departments that you didn't know existed, and you get a sense of how they're spending their money, what their requirements are. So it's a good way to kind of just see that overall picture. And if you're interested in going into producing, really useful space to be in to get a sense of, if you're putting together a budget for even a short film, like what the sort of pieces of equipment are that you need and those sort of things. Really, really good advice.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, one of the interesting things about this industry is that networking is key because it's not a formal industry in as much as, I mean, if you wanted to kind of say, apply for a job at a, sort of a studio like Netflix or whatever, you go through the kind of sort of the normal channels. But if you're a freelance creative, it's kind of dependent on reputation and relationships. And if you're young and you're new to it, you kind of need to kind of sort of place yourself in a position where you're going to get talking to people. And it might be that you do a week or two on accounts, you get chatting to the location manager and you sort of say, hey, listen, if you ever needed a daily, I'd be on board. And you'll be surprised how that works because even though that person might be very busy, they've just freshly spoken to someone. 2-3 weeks later, they go, God, I do actually need somebody to just be a location marshal for me. Who was that person that came in the other day? Can we just get their details and see if they're available? And suddenly you're in, So it's a little bit of a hustle, but it's a good way to get involved. And also the more knowledge you acquire, so if you have sort of been exposed to a little bit of budgeting or whatever it is, talking to people, you appreciate what everybody does and you become a team player. So I think, this, as I said, this random accident with me of being this accountant person telling you about my accounts career has come about because of my acting experience. I talk to people and I build a relationship and I understand what people are doing. And I know some people have got there before me. I may have kind of like, swanned in at 7:30 and going, oh God, I'm sleep deprived. And, now I've got to go into makeup and poor me. But somebody probably started at 5 o'clock to get that artist that, lives in Brighton while somebody else was firing up the Jennies so that, the trucks were lit and warm enough for costume and everybody else to do their job. We really have to kind of understand the process of filmmaking and who's involved.
Yeah, it's something that from the outside world, I find people don't appreciate often how early various things are. So it's like, okay, let's say call, which is when filming is 8 a.m. You're like, okay, so this filming is at 8 a.m. and breakfast will typically be for an hour before that. So let's say 7 till 8. Okay, well, the caterers have had to prepare food for, say, hundreds of people that's ready for 7. So they are maybe getting up at 3 to be there for 5 so they can cook for 2 hours so they've got enough. And it's like, those are all these things that just have 8 a.m., breakfast roll or sarnies or whatever, that people in the outside the industry almost can't picture that. Like, wait, you get up for work at 3 a.m. Or if you're a location manager, setting up a location, or striking out, and it's regular 9 to 5 is not typically very compatible with film.
You're tired. It's unsocial hours. Your colleagues are essentially your family for that period of time, and it is far from glamorous. I think, you know, as the artists, we kind of get away with it slightly in as much as, you know, we're kind of kept in our little bubble and, you know, we go to makeup and, you know, somebody brings us a cup of tea or whatever. But generally, even then, you know, I mean, and I sort of pride myself as an actor like this, that, you know, I'm ready to work because, and again, you know, I mean, I was like this before, but more so since being an accountant, you know, time is money. So if I don't know my lines, or if I'm having a hissy fit because, you know, I don't know, the trousers they've put on me are a bit too long or something, not only is that ruining everybody's day, that's holding up the production process. And so, you know, I essentially kind of hit my marks, say my words, say thank you very much and go home. You know, and I kind of do the same with my accounting work. You know, I switch on my laptop, start answering those emails, get on with what needs to be got on with, build a rapport with everybody I need to build a rapport with so that, you know, we're just making sure everything's happening efficiently so that we can all go home at the end of the day and kind of go, okay, all is well in the universe.
What are the sort of hours that a production accountant works?
So for us, when we're in shoot, it can be 8 till 7. You know, I say it can be because depending on the size of budget, you know, it might be a particularly sort of big machine. But yeah, so, you know, you leave your house at 7 in order to get somewhere at 8 o'clock. You're on, you know, and it's coming at you thick and fast. And then 7 o'clock, you usually wrap up, but the production might still be going. They might not wrap until 8, 9, whatever, you know. So one of you usually has to kind of keep an eye on things just in case if some last minute thing comes in that was unexpected. But also, now where was I going with this about the unsocial hours aspect? You know, you're feeling particularly tired, so you have to kind of watch your mental health and make sure that everybody else is okay around you. So yeah, it's a long day, but then prep it's a little bit shorter. You know, probably is a bit more like 9 to 5, and then once you get into wrap, it's probably 9 till 6. You know, so it's just that period of the shoot. But again, depending on the budget, it can be a long shoot or a short shoot.
Can you talk a bit about? So you got a fascinating way in. Acting to accounting is, you know, not necessarily the typical route.
No, I think I'm quite unique in that respect.
Yeah. What are some of the backgrounds of people you've worked with? Where did they come from? What were they doing before production accounting?
So generally, I think there is a kind of a path, which is either they've wanted to be filmmakers or involved in film, or they've worked in theatre. So I think in that respect, that seems to be the general way in. We don't have many, there are a few, of formally trained accountants. And the reason that is, and there's no reason why people can't come in from a formal background, so I'm not saying that they can't, is that the nature of film and TV production, accounting, is very different from your day-to-day traditional accountant. So I think sometimes when people kind of come in from that sort of arena, they may be incredibly sort of experienced and well-versed, but actually our processes confuse them because we aren't actually there to create a profit. So this kind of blows the myth again about accountants kind of sort of like maybe kind of creaming off the top and walking away with a handsome check. We're there to accurately record every penny that's been given to us. So it's all about the spending because the spending then affects the tax credit. So for more of a traditional accountant, they're a bit like, this is a bit weird, or we do a monthly payroll, or gosh, your processes are not quite the same processes, or you record in a different way. It's like, yeah, we are an SPV, a short-term limited company that's been set up for this project, and it's going to work in a certain way that has been tried and tested and approved by the studios. And traditional accounting will sort of be parked for a while.
Yeah, SPV for people listening is a special purpose vehicle.
Yes.
And it's basically a limited company is set up specifically to make a project, because in order to qualify for a tax credit, you have to have made a loss.
Yep.
So you can't be an existing business because it will get all muddled. And it's a cleaner way of basically showing this company was set up, it spent all of this on the production, therefore we can claim that tax credit.
Absolutely. Yep. Correct.
And you've mentioned that it'd be beneficial for young people to go and intern with accounts, which I absolutely agree with, as does Tom. How would they try and get that?
So there are a couple of avenues. One is so in London, we've got something called London Production Accounts on Facebook. So there might be other groups, sort of around the country that I don't know about. So I don't want to be sort of, London specific. But those groups, people are always putting adverts out for talent. I'm looking for a cashier. I'm looking for an AP assistant, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a good way to kind of come in. And again, if you're coming in as a cashier, you don't have to have a great deal of experience. You just have to be kind of good with numbers and conscientious, and ideally a little bit friendly. Do you know what I mean? That helps. So you can kind of look out for those opportunities. And then things like Screen Skills, which is another website, another organization, they are very kind of keen to have people sort of train through their portal. Now, their portal isn't necessarily, again, a fixed portal. Some of it's like, here you can learn how to do some payroll by, signing up for so-and-so course, or you could do some free online courses and get a couple of certificates and whatever, and advertise yourself through this portal. And that's the advertising yourself and doing the free certificates is obviously free. The courses that they offer are sometimes paid. And the other place to look at, if you're particularly interested in accounting, is the Production Guild. So they offer certain courses, which might be payroll or whatever. And you just have to kind of weigh up. You might sort of say, let's just say for the sake of argument, you're working for a high street retail shop. And you go, I'd really like to try something different. I want to get into film and TV. So these are the avenues to look. And you might sort of say, well, look, the Production Guild have got a payroll course coming up, and it's going to be $1,000 for the sake of argument, but it's not till September. Well, I might just save a bit of money, do that. Then I can advertise myself as having sort of learned X and Y, because there is a demand, there is a need. We're kind of going through a little phase at the moment where things are a bit quieter than usual. So we're recording this in sort of like, May 2024. I'm sure that will change. But the industry is always hungry for new talent. So it's worth kind of now, while things are quiet, just making those inroads, starting to get to know people, starting to talk to people, because there is a demand for people. And I'm sort of a good example of this. I hope I'm not doing myself a disservice by saying this. I've kind of climbed the ranks quite quickly. So that can happen, but it means that there are people at the bottom that we need to kind of bring in so that they can climb the ranks, as well. So I think, making those inroads, just having the confidence, just having the courage, send off a few emails, just start fishing in different ponds. And you might just find that, whether you're interning for a couple of weeks for free or actually doing a little course or whatever, it might bear more fruit than you realise.
It's a great course at the National Film and Television School that they started up for production accounting because of that demand, where they need more production accountants for these jobs.
And I was involved in that during the pandemic and the setting up of that, and I completely forgot about them. Yes, They have a brilliant course, and they're very kind of clear at kind of going through all of those different steps. So thank you, Tom, for that.
And I wanted to ask, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received that you would, share with us? Doesn't even need to be related to the industry.
Goodness. Okay, so now in terms of the best piece of advice, I was once talking in 2004 or something with Steven Soderbergh about the madness of this industry and the way I look. It was sort of post 9/11. Will I ever be taken seriously? Blah de blah de blah. And he said to me, Akbar, you've just got to find a way of doing it for yourself. And that really resonated for me. So that's when I started to produce. That's when I started to find scripts and find Arts Council funding. That's when I started to do little kind of directing courses and sort of get involved in accounts and whatever. And 30 years on, not from that bit of advice, but, probably 20 years on from that bit of advice, I'm still here. And I think, we've got to remember that success in this industry, there's the kind of superficial side where we'll kind of look at Hollywood and we'll kind of go, oh, success, Oscars, all of that stuff. But success is actually still being around, still being employed, still being able to pay your bills.
Yeah, have you heard of Simon Sinek's The Infinite Games?
No. What's that?
So he basically defines it as life can be divided into finite games and infinite games.
Right.
And so finite games is anything that there are defined rules, defined players, defined period of time. If you and I play tennis, that's a finite game.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, for example, something like marriage is an infinite game. You can't win at being married. You win by remaining married, hopefully, happily so.
Yeah.
And it's the same with your career. You can't I had one day and that's it. I have won my career. You win by continuing to have a career.
Yeah.
And so
And ideally, hopefully enjoying it.
And hopefully enjoying it.
Well, I think that's why I've kind of stuck at it, in a sense that I do enjoy it and I do like the people. They are my tribe, so that's why, when people are kind of stressed or whatever, I want to try and think about what's actually going on here. Of course, you're going to have occasionally tricky people, but more often than not, something's going on, isn't there? So I've stuck in this industry because I like it. It speaks to me. It's part of who I am. And so for me, I think that's part of that success, that infinite success, as you say. And, to essentially do something that you love, be around people that you like, and to be paid for it is a incredible gift.
Yeah, absolutely.
It
is a privilege.
Yeah, it is a privilege, definitely.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when it's not necessarily glamorous all the time, but you get to work with amazing people, you get to see amazing things, you get to meet A-list actors from time to time. There's lots to really enjoy about it, for sure.
Well, it's a very kind of enriching industry, so if I, again, think back to the last 30 years, I've been to amazing places, whether it was as an accountant or whether it was as an actor. I've met incredible people. I've worked on scripts that are kind of really interesting and kind of delve into like the whole point of our existence on this planet. I've worked with some fun, loud characters, some celebrities, and that's really, really exciting, and so I think that's what kind of keeps me moving forward, because otherwise, if I hadn't have made this choice, I imagine that my life would have been okay, but probably sort of around, a certain set. I mean, I'm from London. I probably would have had a very much kind of a London life. But, I've lived and worked in LA. I've worked in Budapest, the Middle East, and so that's the excitement that the film business can give you. But it's hard work.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure.
An absolute pleasure. Nice to meet you guys.
Thank you.